Oh, alright, so it's Christmas time. And what happens at Christmas time for yours truly? Well, I have a tendency of popping my top. And we're not talking about my emotions, we're talking about this silly little pressure switch in the power steering rack on our AU Ford Falcon. So that little pressure switch, it lives right down here, right there. And it's a bit of a mongrel to get to, but in my previous video that I showed about replacing this, I go into making a tool, just cutting a spanner in half. The spanner gets behind there and then undoes it. So we take the top off this pressure switch. We'll see it's all wet in there. And yeah, so exactly 1 year to the day this is blown again. It's like an annual Christmas present for me, and I now prepare for it each year. I order one of these pressure switches and I always keep one in stock. So I've been battling with this car and its power steering fluid leak. It's had this tiny little leak all year, but because running a printer repair business and running a family, spare time to deal with this issue properly has to wait until the end of the year. So all year we've been nursing it along. I've just been topping up the fluid. When it gets a little bit too low, and in a previous video we changed the coupling here on the hose, and that fixed a large amount of the leaking that the steering system had. But we've still got a bit of a leak, and that leak is, if we have a look on top of the alternator, in my last video we rebuilt this alternator because the brushes were shot because of the leaking coming from this coupling here. The O-ring in the coupling had failed and it was leaking power steering fluid, dripping down here on top of the alternator. So that leak has been sorted out. We no longer have a leak coming from here. If we look down onto the top of the alternator down here, you'll see that there is a wet patch right there. So what's happening is the seals in this power steering pump, they're 20 years old now, so this car is getting on a bit, and they've never been changed. So there's other videos on YouTube where another guy changes this pump out with a cheap eBay generic power steering pump. I'm always a bit dubious about parts on eBay, so we're going to go a different route today. Today we're going to rebuild this pump. We're going to pull it off and we're going to put in a new seal kit, and with any luck this will be good for another 20 years. So the first thing we're going to do to start off is we're going to pull this pressure switch off, and we're going to drain all of the fluid that's in the system. This is the lowest point that's easiest to get to, because the reason this switch failed this time is that I was desperate because I had run out of fluid Now these cars use a particular type of power steering fluid. I'll just grab the user manual and I'll show you. So we go to our operator's manual for this car, the owner's manual, and we will look up power steering. Power steering fluid, there we go. Page 126 of your owner's manual. If you'd like to join in, go get your operator's manual from your glove box. 126. So we have here a bunch of useless information that's made for people that know nothing about cars. Where is the specifics? We want the specifics. No. Let's just pause a bit. Alright, so we'll get rid of the owner's manual because that's a useless book as far as about this car goes. We're going to go to the Customer Assistance Warranty and Service Guide. So in here is the specifications of what this car requires. So here we go on page 29 of this book. Power steering fluid, written in clear English. Use only power steering fluid that meets Ford specifications. Mobile fluid 424, Ford R1 424. Now, one of the videos I made before telling people about what fluid it needs, everyone's going, oh, it's Valvoline Type F. You must use Valvoline Type F. That's what we use. Well, that's not what Ford recommends. And it's one of the reasons why that pressure switch keeps blowing its top. Now, I don't know if my previous video caused a shortage on Mobile Fluid 424, but I haven't been able to buy it anywhere. So here we have Mobile 424 fluid. This is an empty bottle because I've been nursing this power steering along for the entire year. I can't buy it anywhere. I normally buy it at 7-Elevens or mobile service stations. And in my stupidity, because we were in a rush, it's the end of year, school, tasks, I've gone and bought this stuff. And I've put about 1 litre through the pump over the space of 3 to 4 weeks. So that was like the beginning of December. And then of course the pressure switch has given out. So this fluid, it's not classed as a power steering fluid, but it's what Ford recommends. If we go and look the specifics up, which I'll do now for you. So here on the Mobile website about Mobile 424 fluid, here's what it's called: a multi-purpose tractor lubricant. It's not called power steering fluid at all. So there's the web link up there if you want to go to it. And that's what Ford recommends. They don't recommend Valvoline Type F. And as long as you're using this fluid, that pressure switch shouldn't fail. Alright, so to begin with this repair, we are going to undo the top of the power steering fluid pump. I'm going to take the drain direction thing out. I'm going to put that back on. Set that aside up there. Next thing I'm going to do is we're going to get our special tool we made, and we're going to pull the sensor off down here, and we're going to put a bucket underneath this area because quite a lot of fluid's going to come out everywhere. Alright, so we've got our bucket underneath the car there to catch the our steering fluid that's come out. We've got our 14mm spanner with a custom angle bend on it, and that will go down in here. And we will slip our spanner in behind it. You've only got to undo it, and then you can pretty much just twist it off from the top. So we've undone that. And now we can just twist it off from the front. And any remaining fluid in the system will just start to ooze out because it's a low point in the system. There we go. And we'll knock that to the side. If you've got a spare set of hands, if you get someone inside to rock the steering wheel backwards and forwards, it will create a pumping action which will drain the entire rack out at the same time. So I'll see if I can just rig something up here. Not really. So I'll just rock that steering wheel. There we go, quite a lot of fluids coming out. Alright, so the next step is we've got to get this pump off. So it's just simply a matter of grabbing, well, this is how I loosen the serpentine belt anyway. I just grab it and I lift it over. Obviously a lot easier when you're doing it two-handed. So we've lifted that up and over, now we can just casually peel it off. So we will now move on to pulling the couplings off and the hose here that's held on by the clamp. And And what I'm going to do this time, instead of undoing this and letting any fluid that's still in here pour into the alternator, I'm going to cover the alternator with a bag, some sort of cover, just to stop the fluid, and we'll move the pan down to here just to grab any excess that's coming off the pump. Alright, so we've got a bag there over the alternator now. Oh wow, that's still too tight. And as we can see, the system is completely dry, there's nothing in it. Alright, so we'll go on and we'll pull this clamp off and pull this hose. Okay, so that's the two hoses free. Next step is we will do that bolt and that bolt over there. And I think that should back the pump pretty much free. I think it's not much holding that thing on. Get onto that one. Now I won't pull that one there out completely because we have to undo this nut on the end over here as well. There. Alright, so we've loosened that nut off that's in there. So that's now loose. We've pulled out the bolt from here, and there's one more bolt which is just down there. Got to get that out, and I think that's it. The pump should just come out. Get in there. That's got it. Alright, so we've got all the 3 bolts on the front of it off. We've got the nut here at the back loosened off. Now the pump should just lift up and out. like so. So we can see here now we've got the pump out. There has been a leak going on in this section in here. And if we look under the pump, we can see that the bottom of the pump is all wet. So yeah, the seal on the front of that pump there has obviously failed. It's just a rubber O-ring. You know, rubber will only last for about 10 years in situ. And if you're filling the power steering pump with the wrong type of fluid, it of course softens the O-rings and makes them leak. So it's very important to use what's recommended in the book. So we'll move on and we'll start pulling this apart and rebuilding it, or resealing it I should say. Alright, so we've got our pump out of the car, set up in a bit of a work area. It's just a matter of pulling off that nut that lives on here. So next step is we've got to undo this nut here, and we've got to undo that nut down there. And then we should be able to separate the front from the chamber away. So we will just put a 19mm spanner, 18mm spanner on here, and we'll smack it with a hammer so that it's free. Alright, so we've loosened these off. It's just a matter of taking them out. Silver on that one. This one. Ooh, this one's green. Look at that. That one. Alright, so the next thing is we have to undo this coupling here, and that takes a rather large 1 inch, maybe a bit smaller than 1 inch, but that's all I've got that's going to fit, so we'll smack that off. So we've just hit the side of that with the hammer, and then that one's undoing, and then I fully expect the pump should just easily fall out, hopefully. Yep, spring loaded, look at that. There's the piston inside, I think. What have we got going on here? Alright, so we've got all the bolts out, and then it's just a matter of just shaking it free. All the fluid will come pouring out, that's just still in the pump. And that lets us have a good look at what we've got to deal with inside as far as seals go. The worst thing you can do is get any scraps of dirt in here now. We've got a big rubber O-ring. We've got a change right here. Wow, that one's gone rock hard, no wonder it's leaking. It's no longer soft. It looks like we've got an O-ring here, O-ring here, and an O-ring here that we've got to replace. Maybe, what is that? Is that a filter? Oh no, that's a magnet which has picked up all the stray bits of iron floating around. So obviously we'll pull this magnet off, and we'll clean that up and get all that crud off there as well. Alright, let's get into cleaning it up. Alright, so I'm not going to pull the pump fully down on this because we know it's just seals that are leaking. The actual pump mechanism is working completely fine. So we've just cleaned up the magnet here that's had all the iron filings, the stray bits of iron that come off in the system, traps it. It's just now a matter of pulling out each O-ring. So these have a square O-ring on them. We have a square O-ring on this one. We have a square O-ring on this one. And we'll pop our new ones in. So it's a much tighter fit there now. And this is why it's really important to use the correct fluid recommended by the manufacturer. Different oils will affect this rubber in different ways. Some oils will make the rings shrink, and of course they just won't seal properly anymore. Just got to get the big one off now. We'll just carefully put a screwdriver in there. We don't want to gouge the actual metal body because then that will create a tiny little micro channel where oil can come through. So I will just get something blunt behind there and we'll get that O-ring off. Alright, so I've just stuck a screwdriver carefully in here, and this O-ring is so bad, it's gone so rock hard that it just cracked. So this is what the wrong type of oil in the system will do. It'll send O-rings rock hard. You get the same in automatic transmissions. So I'll just pry that off. So if we have a look at this O-ring, you can see that's how brittle it's become after 20 years. It's simply just turned into, it's no longer rubber, it's turned into plastic really. That's amazing. And that's the source of the leak that I've been putting up with for about a year. It's simply this rubber O-ring has failed, and more than often than not, in many other systems that have failed, that's what the cause of the leaking will be. And if you compare that to a new O-ring, completely flexible, nice and soft. That's why it's important to use the manufacturer's recommended lubricant. And I'll just put that down, and I'll carefully roll it around. Of course, it's much easier doing it two-handed. And then after this, it's just a case of reassembling the pump. I may change, there is an oil seal on the front, but this one looks like it hasn't been leaking, so I may leave that for a different time. Because we may only have the car for another 2 or 3 years. So to get to that seal, the pulley at the front has to be pulled off with a puller. It's quite an involved job, and I'm really not in the mood for it today. So we'll just do these seals for today, and we'll see if we stop getting drips going into the alternator. And yeah, I mean, this whole fix is under $50 easily. There's no need to replace the entire pump. That's just overkill. And you know, hydraulic pumps very rarely fail, so it's just the rubber seals that give out, and that's it usually. So alright, we'll start reassembly and we'll go from there. Alright, so I've just cleaned up the edge with a clean rag of the housing. It's just simply a case of carefully putting the housing back on, lining up the holes, and then we've got to slowly push it on because we've got to defeat that new O-ring, which is quite obviously putting a lot of outwards pressure to provide a really good seal, versus this one, which was providing no pressure and providing no sealing action whatsoever. So, alright, so I've now just squeezed the two halves together, the pumps back in. You just got to make sure that these are squarely mated to their respective holes, and that you haven't pushed those new rubber seals off to the side. And yeah, just make sure it's all flush with the new rubber seals in here. And now it's just a matter of we'll stick the bolts back in, tighten it all back up, and we'll put it back on the car. So I think from right, it was the green one over here. Another one over here. And we have our pressure relief. Oh, our valve. Oh, we're running out of battery. Let's put the valve back in as well. I almost forgot, on the valve there is an O-ring as well that we've got to change in here. So we'll just pull that off and we'll change that O-ring as well before we reassemble it. Alright, so we've got our new rubber O-ring fitted to this, and we will simply put that back in. It's spring loaded and we will tighten that up. In fact, I'm going to do that two-handed because I don't like the pressure that's on that. Alright, so we've got our pump all back together. The bolts are all tightened up on the back. It's just a matter now of just putting it back in the way we pulled it off. We'll tighten everything up and we'll see how it goes. Alright, so we've got our pump back on. We've bolted all the connections up, all the bolts and nuts are in. Hoses are tightened up nice and tight. We've got the order of the hoses around the right way, I think. Yeah, I think that's the right way. We've got the new pressure switch down here fitted. Now it's just a case of we've got to get this, which is obviously the cable. We need to degrease that because when it pops the top, it fills this top area up full of power steering fluid. So we'll just get the can of degreaser and just get that in there and clean that up. Put our drip tray back on. We're just going to fill it up with some 424 and we should be good to go, and hopefully there are no more drips coming onto that alternator down there. And I'll just see how we go. So it's all back together, it's all running. No leaks going on as far as I can tell. So we'll just try that out for the next week or so, and we'll see how it goes. So if this has helped out, just hit the like, hit the subscribe button if you want. I think it looks pretty good. Air conditioning's doing its thing. So yeah, we'll call that done. Thanks for watching.